Hello everyone and welcome back. Something a little different this time, mostly because it's a cool case that I had recorded. So as you can see, large gross caries on number 14, as well as 18 and 19. Now, I discussed that we could possibly get away with just doing crowns on at least 14 and 19. 18 was necrotic at this point, but after talking about the patient and the general dentist, they wanted me to take it, just do the root canals, do it prophylactically, because the patient did have some anxiety and she didn't want the potential for pain or drilling through the crowns. And in something very different, she wanted to be sedated and have all three teeth done at the same time. So something very different we haven't talked about is how to do multiple teeth at the same time with one rubber dam. So first off, she already had a limited opening. So this case was extra fun of trying to get everything fitting inside there. You can see I can't even get the flat disc in there perpendicular to the tooth and actually have to sweep through just to get these cusps off. You'll see how I manage this when we do the restorative at the end, so stick around for that. And you'll also notice I have 3 rubber dam clamps on there. I know someone asked me how I do rubber dams, and I'm certainly not the expert at making them look like Instagram pretty, but I do make them very functional. And so we have one number 2 on number 19 reversed. So I can keep it down and get access to where the caries is. And then 2 14s on both 14 and 18. After flattening everything off, the reason, if you're doing multiple teeth like this, hey, flatten these teeth off. You're going to get a lot more space if you take 1.5 millimeters off of each. You just gain 3 millimeters of space. And on this patient, her max opening was barely 20 millimeters. So in hindsight, probably not the best idea to do this all at once on her.
I've made a huge mistake.
But she was sedated, she was here, we were going to get this all taken care of her. You can actually see the 2 14 bands are touching. And yes, there is a hole in the rubber dam. But at this point, it took me probably 5 minutes off camera to get these silly rubber dam clamps in the right spot, and so I was not going to be replacing this rubber dam unless it ripped more and I was worried about it. So we will actually use some block out to clean that out. At this point, removing the decay, getting the amalgam out of there as well. I like that big old surgical length round burr. Even though she has limited access opening, I still like the surgical length for these sorts of things just because it gives me a better view. You'll notice the head is not in my view at all, and so that's one of the reasons I like surgical length. Even with most of my burrs, I tend to push them about 2 to 3 millimeters out of the full engagement with the shank, which is why I have to replace my turbines and the cartridges more often, which there's videos on that if you're interested of that, how to do that. But it's one of the things I like to do because it gives me better visibility. I want my eyes to be always on, if you're wondering where my eyes are in these videos, it is always on the tip of wherever the burr is. I very, very, very rarely am doing anything blind or by feel. I'm always needing to see exactly where it is. You'll notice here on 18, I didn't really have to do too much as far as indirect vision and could do most of it direct. You'll see the mirror kind of hinted in there. I wasn't able to get my visibility is actually a little bit greater than what the camera can see because the camera is in a rectangle and I can actually see in a circle, so I can actually see outside of it. So sometimes when I'm recording, I forget that the camera can only see in that rectangle in the middle, and so I will actually be outside of it, but I could actually see in the mirror there. And that's why some of these angles are way off in the bottom. I try to crop these and zoom in to show you a picture that you can see what I see, but when you're actually working inside the scope, very, very different as well. For those of you who asked for the microscope video, I promise I am working on that. I'm excited to get that one out there because I think that will hopefully be a really good one for everybody here. So at this point, we have exposed the pulp on 18 as expected, and now I'm using my workhorse burr like normal to get inside the pulps of the remaining teeth. I did just order something. I usually use a 850-014 burr. And I've noticed with some of my troughing videos recently that it's a little too large. I want to go a little bit smaller, so I just ordered a bunch of 012s, and we'll see those put into use here very soon. I'm excited to see kind of what that looks like. So going a little skinnier. Hopefully they're still just as tough burrs because these things do get a workout. This is by far the burr that I replace the most often because I use it on pretty much every single case because it's just that useful. So I'll report back. You'll probably see that here in a month after we get time for, recording and editing and things like this. I'm usually about 2 weeks out as far as the recording process here. So at this point, we've gained access to everything and going in with that 8C file now just to make sure we have a glide path for our rest of our rotary files. I have cut out a lot of this video. It took me about an hour to do all 3 of these teeth with the buildups. And that's one of the benefits of doing multiple teeth like this because you don't have to go back through. You can actually just get everything done all at once. So I'm doing, there's ended up being 2 canals on 18, 4 canals on 19, and 4 canals on 14. And so I am doing all 10 canals at the same time, rinsing all 10 canals at the same time. And you get the idea that you can be very efficient here. And for this patient, she loved it because she was anxious. So she just had to be sedated once. That's much safer than sedating them multiple times. And getting this all done at the same time is fantastic. I would recommend, if you've never done this before, try to do it with either, if you've never done, like, do 12 and 13, if those, or in the anterior, do 8 and 9. Those are, I think everyone here is capable of doing that. But if you've never done the up and down, I recommend 2 first molars. That gives you a little bit more space. It's an easier process to do. If I didn't have to have 18 in there, this would have been a much, much easier case to do. At this point, we're cleaning out everything, starting that process. Kind of what you've seen before. I was not able to get down the MB canal very easily on 19 for some reason. So that's what you're seeing here is I'm using that workhorse. I cannot say that word. I need a vocal coach to help me with the word workhorse, apparently, because it always sounds like workhorse. And so I do apologize for that. But as what we're doing is just kind of troughing down here with that 850 burr. I guess I should just say 850, that's easier. And making a little bit more space. This one was one of the cases where I think the initial access was more towards the medial aspect of the tooth and just took a really sharp turn there. You can see this patient also had a large amount of pulp stones inside the tooth. I know someone asked me about pulp stones recently. Pretty much just work away at them, use small files. In general, you want to try to remove as much as possible from the coronal aspect before you start working in the canals themselves to minimize the risk of pushing anything down inside there. If you do end up having pulp stones inside the tooth, what I would recommend is to use a combination of really small files, headstrums, and small rotaries to start to break them up. Lots of rinsing, and I usually like to use EDTA for this. Switched out to the EG3 here just because I wanted to be nice and conservative, getting down in that area. And when I use the EG3, it often creates, well, it does create a point, and that point sometimes will grab my 8C file and prevent me from getting into the area that I want. So you'll notice after finding the canal, I will often go back in with that 850 because it is a rounded tip, but it is flatter than the EG3. And that gives me something to almost press apically against. So if you're having trouble finding canals after you've troughed with whatever pointed device that may be, whether that's an ultrasonic or an EG3, whatever it may be, you can use Munspurs. There's lots of different, you pick your favorite. It's sometimes nice to go back through with a flatter burr just to make it so that you can get into the canals a little bit more easily. At this point, you're probably wondering, okay, how the hell are you going to rinse with that big old hole in the tooth or the rubber dam? And I'm going to just use a lot of blockout resin. Had this been any other case and I was just doing a single tooth, you can bet I would have taken the rubber dam off, redone this. But because it took me so long, and we actually had pretty good isolation at this point, I am more than happy to use up a tube of blockout resin to get this thing sealed so that the patient does not have to taste any of the trait in their mouth. So I also cut out a large amount of rinsing, just because you guys know exactly what that looks like. But just know that there is a lot of rinsing of both water and Triton inside these cases because we want to keep them nice and clean. But you all know what that looks like. But I put this in here to show you that, yes, I am rinsing in between every file. This video was close to an hour long before I started making these cuts. So we got this thing down to about 25 minutes, which is actually pretty good for 3 teeth. So at this point, we have found all the canals, opened them up with the 2006, and now I need to go after MB2 because I was not able to grab that initially with the 8. And right here, using that 850, that workhorse, ooh, I said it right that time, good. Using the workhorse burr to start that troughing process like I've shown in my other videos. I like to start, when I don't really see too much, I like to start with the MB1 that I've already found, brush along it. You can see didn't grab anything there with the 8C, so I will be going back down again. And this is because when you deal with MB2s, they often take a very sharp S-curve in the first 2 to 3 millimeters. After that, they become pretty straight. And we'll sometimes switch to using a 6 in these cases. In her case, the canal was very, very small, as you can see. Still not grabbing anything, so now we're going to use an EG3 to trough along that line. And you can see there's almost an isthmus between where the MB1 and MB2 are located, and you can take that EG3 and trough along there. Back that up like I was talking about earlier in the video with the workhorse burr to make it easier to get your files inside there. And after a little bit of time, we were able to go ahead and get working length here. I cut out all the working length because you guys don't need to see that. But I was finally able to grab a little bit inside there and start working here with the 1704. And what I'm showing here is just, we're going through pretty much every canal. I will finish the vast majority of these cases to 1704s, just like all my other videos. There is a lot of measurements that I cut out as well, because that's the one thing is when you have 10 different canals, and they were all over the place as far as different measurements here. You do have to, make sure you're measuring, and that's why you see that the stopper is not in the normal position. Some of these canals were a little bit shorter. If it's in that 18 to 21 millimeter region, I usually don't measure because I'm used to seeing it with her. I think she had a couple that were like 16, so a little bit shorter as far as the length here. But at this point, we've done all the canals, finished everything out. I did have my camera did black out a little bit here. I use a EOS RP, so if you guys have any recommendations for better video cameras, I know that's mostly a still photo camera, but I don't really want to buy a $4,000 video camera just to make videos for all of you. And these have been pretty solid. So I'm not sure why we had a blackout there for my shaping of the number 14, but I promise we cleaned it. You'll see the photos here in a second because, well, being a photo camera, it does work really well for that. Going through now with the activator, the final rinse process, I cut some of that out as well. I think I ended up using, probably 4 syringes of Triton in this case. I forget, it's been a couple weeks since I finished this one up. But as I've talked about in the past, the question is always, when do you stop? I tend to look for, is there debris coming up? Is there bubbles coming up? And we're able to get this thing nice and dry. Going in now with our paper points to dry everything. I cut that out as well. It's what you've seen before. You take them to length and dry the canals. Here's what the photos look like. So 14's looking nice and clean there. There's 18, just 2 canals on this one. They did kind of join up. And I will say to any dental students who are out there, and there's the troughing on number 19. You can see we picked that up. For any dental students out there saying, of course, there's 2 canals on a lower molar. It is extremely, extremely rare for me to find 2 canals on a lower molar. This is probably the maybe 10th one I have seen since I finished residency in 2014. So it is not a normal thing. Most of the time you have not opened your access enough. I cannot tell. This is the frustrations of an educator who worked in a school for a while. No, you don't have a 2-canaled lower molar. They're extremely rare. You usually have 4 when you're looking at it like that. I switched out I cut out a lot of the obturation as well. If you want more information on that, my most recent video has an in-depth guide to how I do the squirt technique. And I did take a few photos here, pictures here. Sorry. X-rays here. We always call them photos. I don't like using the word X-ray with patients, but we did take some radiographs and a couple spots that I needed to top off with the PacMac. That's what you're seeing there. And now that we are ready to clean everything up, finish these cases, there was a little bit of caries and some amalgam on number 14 that I left on purpose so that we could have a better almost chamber to rinse everything in, and it lowers the risk of any bleach going inside the mouth. You'll also notice I have removed the majority of the blockout resin at this point as well. And the reason I did that is because I need access to the gingival areas to clean them up. That's what I'm doing right now with the alpha unit, is little cauterization to just stop any bleeding points to make sure we get a really nice seal in this area. And really happy that the patient and the dentist went along with me doing the restorative here as well, because I would feel kind of bad if we spent all this time putting these beautiful white lines on the x-ray and then not actually getting to prep them, because you'll see at the end I'm pretty pleased with how everything turned out here. And if for the residents out there watching, for the dentists who don't have access to electrosurges, lasers, a unit like this works great. You can get them pretty affordably secondhand on eBay, or try to talk to other dentists in town, see if they have any available, because a lot of people wanted to learn how to do warm vertical and then end up not using it. That's actually how I got one of my alpha units. I think it was like $400 on eBay with a bunch of tips, and it was pretty much brand new. Someone else also asked me, why do I disclose if I'm just going to blast everything? And this shows you right here. Look at number 18 and how pink that mesiolingual cusp is compared to the distal. And so you'll notice I am going to focus a lot more on the areas where the disclosing solution shows that there is the presence of biofilm. I'm always amazed by cases that have large caries and then don't have any biofilm whatsoever, and vice versa. Cases that barely have anything and you get inside there and there's biofilm and stuff to clean off. So The reason I use it, yes, I end up blasting most of the tooth structure anyway. This stuff is not aluminum oxide. It's, I think, aluminum trisilicate. So it is far less abrasive. If you've ever used blasting solutions before, usually it's going to be aluminum oxide, which is pretty much sandpaper, just in a powdered form. And it's a very, very aggressive. You can actually remove tooth structure. There are people who back in the day would prep using this sort of thing to remove, caries. That would create a huge mess everywhere. I don't recommend it, which is why no one does it anymore. But this stuff from BioClear is a lot softer, and it doesn't really remove too much tooth structure at all. I think it's actually not even strong enough to remove tooth structure, especially enamel, but it does a nice job of removing the biofilm that would inhibit your bonding strength in these areas. So the other question I had recently was, why do I still do total etch? And that is because even with self-etch, there is lots of good evidence showing that total etch plus self-etch is your best option for bonding strength there. So these are the still photos of everything cleaned up, dried off, looking ready for bonding. Very pleased with how these all look. And yes, sometimes the gutta percha does get that little pink from the disclosing solution. It doesn't bother me whatsoever. I think it's just a reaction with something inside there. As soon as you etch and start doing the bonding process, all that removes. So going in with the prime here, you'll notice I'm dipping off to the side, and what I'm doing is the assistant has a little well right next to the rubber dam, so I don't have to go too far. And I end up, with a case like this where there's 3 teeth, I would highly recommend having 2 assistants in the room. You have one sitting chairside and one helping with the restorative, because it's a lot. This is way more stressful than the obturation or any other aspect, because you're kind of running against the clock. You just did all this cauterization on those gingival tissues, and that only lasts a few minutes before they start to bleed back. I think a laser would last a lot longer, but for what I have here, we only have a limited amount of time, and so being efficient is very important. You'll notice I'm going in with the air-only strop coat here, one of my favorite tools, especially for restorative, get everything nice and clean. And now we're going to start the build-up process. One tip, if you're doing multiple teeth here, is to start with the most posterior teeth, or tooth, I should say, and that is because gravity. You're going to have sloughing of the restorative material as it falls distally. So start with the most distal aspect, get that one looking good. While I am starting to clean this up with the glick, the other assistant is getting the next centrix tube ready. And so here we are on tooth number 19. While I'm doing this, she is mixing the third one. In case you're wondering how long it takes for build up to setup, it is 2 of these. You'll see in a second here, my third one does not go very well, and I was only able to fill the very bottom part of the chamber because it has already, look at how hard that is already. You can see the shaking because I'm pushing so hard there. And at this point, I say, all right, we're good, let's give up. Come back in. I ended up light curing those other 2, tried to do something with the glick. It didn't really work. So while we're doing this, she's remixing another set of the Build It, and we will then fill up the remainder of tooth number 14 with that material at this point. So if you're doing multiple teeth and you're using Build It, which is a fantastic material, I highly recommend it, you can do 2. That's about it, and you'll have to remix a third one after that. So now we are starting the process of cleaning everything out. First thing I did is remove that 2A because I don't need really that anymore. I was not able to even get that flat disc inside there. So here's a trick that we actually did back in residency because no one bought us those nice wheel burrs. We have to use something else. So I just take my crown pet burr, turn it sideways, and now you have more space. This is a trick you can use on patients who have limited openings because there is a certain amount of height of the head of the handpiece plus the burr, and her mouth could not open that far, especially with all the stuff inside there. So you turn it sideways and it's much easier. You can see I'm trying now that I've removed a little bit there to see if I can make the top work. It really didn't. I end up using the prep burr for that one as well. First thing I always do on cases like this is the interproximal area because on 2 teeth abutted to each other, it really does create a nice space. On the maxilla, you'll notice that because of the decay that was there, she has had some movement and there's very little restorative space. So on the mandible, there's tons of space, should be very straightforward as far as the restorative. On the maxilla, I had to do a couple creative things you'll see here in just a second to make sure we have the best outcome and the best way for the dentist to be able to get a nice crown on top of there. So polishing that all off. At this point though, the rubber dam's kind of just more in my way than anything else. So take off that lower one. And yes, I realize this is messy. This is not Instagram pretty. This is kind of more real world endo, not to use that trademark, but this is the endodontic orthodontics that you would do in the real world. That's not, fun fact, not everybody takes vacations on Instagram. So I know that's most of the pictures that people post, and most of the x-rays and videos and photos that they post on Instagram are also pretty. But this is kind of what it's like in the real world. Sometimes things are a little bit messy. There's some blood. There's, patients are difficult. We work on people. And we love that. That's part of the fun part, is the challenges that come within there. So at this point, we're starting to polish everything off. Thankfully, even though she had a limited opening, her tongue was very, very kind and did not come up in there. So it made this part very straightforward. That's one of the reasons I like to prep as much as possible with the rubber dam on, is I hate fighting with the tongue. And oftentimes I'm fighting with the tongue quite a lot. So you'll also notice that I am prepping dry here. I found that, especially without the rubber dam in that area, it's so much easier to prep these areas dry. Okay, talking about the maxillary tooth now, like I said, it has definitely, everything has kind of collapsed in that area. So what I started off doing here is what you're seeing with the workhorse. Actually, sorry, this is the prep burr. I'm starting the process until I go down and start to see tooth structure. And you'll notice the sparks there. There is a large, kind of over contoured zirconia crown next to this one. So I am recontouring that tooth. And I'm then coming in with that workhorse burr. Ooh, there you go, I said it again. Because it's a lot skinnier. So my prep burr is an 018. My workhorse is a 014. I started the process of actually removing some of the root structure there to create more space, because yes, that does weaken the tooth slightly. However, what is going to cause this tooth to fail is further decay. And if the dentist tried to put a under contoured crown in this area, I don't think this tooth would make it. So create more space. And that's what you're seeing me do here. Like I said, I was not able to get the wheel burr inside her mouth. And so I'm coming in now with that big, large prep burr and using it sideways and getting this thing nice and shortened down, because we want to create more restorative space for the dentist as well. And that's the process you're seeing here. And now for the distal aspect, because she does have 15 inside there, it is nice to go in, and you can see I'm more recontouring the interproximal shape of 15 at this point rather than working on 14. And that's because if it's irregular, it's more likely for things to be caught inside there. This is something that David Clark teaches, of polish those interproximals. This is your best chance to do it. I'm now using that workhorse burr to remove the root dentin that is touching. You can see it is literally touching that tooth, and we're going in very gently. And at this point, I'm just kind of smoothing off the shape on 15. And now that we have the space, I'm coming back in with that workhorse burr to finalize that prep. And yes, I am removing a little more root dentin here as well. And the reason why is this patient was not going to go through orthodontics. That's the only real way to fix this. I've tried to use bands to expand this area, and it just doesn't really work that well for a patient like this who's already afraid of the dentist, wants everything done at a single visit. It's better to just get it done. Take a less than, picture perfect, like I said, Instagram worthy case, and make it something that's going to last, because that's what the patient truly cares about. You'll notice the distal aspect, number 18, has a little bit of excess gingival tissue as well. It's okay to rough it up a little bit, because when it heals, it generally heals in a tighter format, so you won't have quite as much gingival overgrowth, and it's going to heal because it's almost like scar tissue. It's going to have a higher keratin content, which makes it better for crowns. So, fun fact there as well. And that's pretty much what we're doing here, finalizing these. So you can see in order of how I prep these multiple teeth, remove the occlusal, get that prepped up, then do the interproximal, and then finally connect the dots. That's kind of how I was taught to do crown preps in dental school. And I'm not sure, do what makes you happy, but that's kind of where we are. Finally, now that everything looks clean, I'm going in with the barrel burr to help finalize that preparation. I'm actually going to post a video here soon. We heard a lecture earlier last week that was supposed to come out this week, but due to technical difficulties, I need to give them about 15 more minutes, so that's not going to come out for another month. But we talked about how to do small little things to make patients and restorative dentist lives better, and this is one of those things. Smooth this off so that there's no sharp spots for the patient, and now it's very easy for the dentist to go in, and all she really has to do is probably a small amount of reduction and maybe a little bit of prep, and these teeth will be ready to impress. What you do here is you give these patients a Proxibrush so they can keep everything clean, And that's what it looks like. So lots of space in between the teeth. There's a ton of restorative space. I wasn't able to get a great view of 18. That was the last picture I took because she was just kind of having it. And then there's what 19 looks like. So we're coming up on these x-rays here. Really pleased with these. As you can see, nice and skinny, but there's space now for the restorative on that. And look at the size of the crown on 13. Cute little split on 18. Really pleased with how these all looked out. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I promise I am working on all the requests here. I'm trying to get at least my 2 videos out per week. I will be at Endocon. Actually, let's see, this drops on Thursday this week. So this will be, yeah, so what is it, October... Yeah, so this is Monday, October 2nd when I'm recording this. So October 5th, I will hopefully see a bunch of you at Endocon. If you're there, come up and say hi. I'd love to meet anyone who's there. Otherwise, as always, drop a comment, like and subscribe. The more subscribers we get, the more it's able to tell me what you all want to see. Apparently, MB2s and curved cases are what we like. And I do have a cool resorption case coming out. That will probably be coming out, I think, next week. But excited for that one as well. So, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.